Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, everybody, depending on when you're watching. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to day 30 of Perfect Album Side, and in the co-captain's chair once again, Mr. Steve Fleck. What's happening?
Hey Pete, howdy everybody. Always glad to be here. Always excited by this kind of new little series we're putting through here, and ready to put my 2 cents in.
There you
Hopefully, it's worth
go.
a dollar.
That's right. So Steve's 2 cents and my 2 cents equals 15 cents. No, I don't think so.
That's maybe something like that. Well, inflation, yeah,
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 So
something like that.
welcome to day 30. We've got today and then tomorrow, and then we're going to move into something different for June. But in July, we're going to come back and revisit this concept once again. So stay tuned for that. But today we've got a little business to take care of. Steve and I both have two perfect album sides that we love a lot. So with all that being said, Steve's going to kick us off here on this episode with his choice for today.
Thanks, my friend. Well, we're gonna go maybe slightly off track here from some of the perfect sides that I've seen. Although I've seen a ton of diversity involved in the ones that we've had on so far. I'm gonna go to one of my favorite bands and one of my all these perfect album sites kind of go back to my early choices as far as favorite bands go. And this is one of my all-time favorites. It's Chicago 5, and it's side one. It's from 1971, and it is interestingly the last album Chicago recorded at CBS Studios in New York before they made the move up to Caribou Ranch with half of the pop rock world when Jimmy Gershio opened up the Caribou Ranch studios, and it affected and changed their sound in an interesting way. So with Five being their final recording at CBS, I want to say that aside from the first album, which is groundbreaking and sonically just brilliant, I think they struck out a little on the next two albums as far as production goes, not as far as their songs go. But I just felt the sounds were thin on the second and third album and could have been better and sounded a little rushed. And so when that said, you go back and you listen to Five, it is CBS Studios at their very best. It's Jimmy Gershio producing at his very best, and the engineering is sparkling. As a matter of fact, I take this album whenever I was kind of playing around with different audio tweaks and different amplifiers and things. I play the vinyl to test out my new equipment because I know this album so well. This is the album I put on. So you really can't go wrong. It's classic early Chicago. They were very much involved in experimenting with jazz on this album, and also we're still a very viable pop rock band at this time. And of course, they had the most amazing guitarist still in the band, still leading the band, Terry Kath, and all the original members here as well. And to me, just possibly, they're could be their best album ever. So, Hit by Vorace, what can you say about that? Odd timing, odd tempo. All is Well, another just beautifully melodic with elements of jazz, lots of nice electric piano by Mr. Robert Lamb. Now That You've Gone could be one of my favorite songs of all time. That's I believe, a Jimmy Pankow song. Maybe wrong on that one. But the thundering drums that intro that, I think those Danny Seraphine drums are recorded and engineered and sound possibly the best I've heard them sound. Lots of air, lots of breathing room. Jimmy Pankow.
Yep.
And then the rest of the album was pretty much Robert Lamb, who was on a freaking tear, with the exception of Alma Mater, which was Terry Kath's song. Yes. Dialogue Part 1 and 2, big single for them. Just fantastic. Two songs in one, part one, part two, obviously very different. Just to hear the interplay between Peter Cetera's tenor and Terry Kath's Ray Charles baritone is stunning. And hearing their Kath soloing at the end of it as it kind of swells with the horns is just pretty much as good as it gets with this band. And I just love this album side to death. I love side two as well, but I had to pick one side, so this is it.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, side two is strong. Side one is, yeah, it's quite good. It just doesn't let up, but it also gives you everything that's so great about Chicago, all in, 4, 5, whatever you want to call it, songs that give you little all the feels of Chicago right there.
I mean, alma mater for all it is. I mean, it's certainly not a 5. It's probably about a 3, and so I could never pick side 2. But every one of these is a 5 to me, and
Yeah.
that's why I picked it. You know.
Yeah. Dialogue, both parts are just absolutely killer. Absolutely killer. Yeah.
Totally.
I love this album too. It's amazing the quality of these early Chicago albums from one to the next to the next. I've said it a million times, and this is a single album, obviously, but who else in rock and roll history busts out of the gate with not one, not two, but 3 double albums, and then puts out the Carnegie Hall set? I mean, who does that? Nobody.
Right. No. No, nobody, and no one ever will.
People were buying them, right? Because nowadays you can't do that. Obviously, that's career suicide, right? Even at once in middle and late 70s, you wouldn't do something like that.
No,
But,
I mean, God forbid now you release any kind of physical medium,
Yeah, true,
so,
true.
yeah.
So, great choice. Side A, side 1 of Chicago 5. Beautiful, beautiful. All right, so I'm going to go ahead a couple of years to 1980 for the reformed, regrouped, reconfigured, retooled, whatever you want to call it, King Crimson, Discipline. Side A. Robert Fripp, Adrian Belew, Bill Bruford, Tony Levin. This was a brand new beast at the time. This was King Crimson moving into the 80s after being away for a bunch of years. You got Fripp, who, had played with David Bowie, and you got Belew, who was with Frank Zappa and the Talking Heads. And obviously, Mr. Bruford had Bruford going in UK. Yes, King Crimson and Tony Levin playing, for quite a long time, still with Peter Gabriel. And all of a sudden, you have this King Crimson beast that is doing all sorts of new things, but incorporating elements of what was going on in music around them at the time, new wave and post-punk and, more electronic music and whatnot. And here they've got this just incredible album with all these new King Crimson sounds. It kind of sounds like Crimson, but not, but it's still rhythmically very daring and just, songs like Elephant Talk. Do you remember the first time you ever heard this album and you heard Elephant Talk? You're like, what the hell's going on here? Adrian Belew using his Stratocaster to get all these freaking elephant noises and whatnot. And then you've got, Frame by Frame, which is just like undulating and intoxicating song, great vocal from Mr. Belew. You've got the enchanting Mate Kudasai, which again, so different. You got those little bird call guitar things going on there. And then the just ominous Indiscipline song, which is just like at first, there's not much going on. Dun, 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 dun. And he's just like kind of singing and talking. And then you get the frenzy of the second half of the song. Man. And, I could have picked side 2. Almost did.
Easily.
Because that's great also. But I think side 1 is just a little bit better. Just a little bit better. And, this lineup would go and release 2 more. Neither one, I think, is really as good as this one. And your dog agrees.
Yeah.
She's like, that's right. Discipline is
shutting that door. She does love King Crimson, though.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna just say right off the bat that that album is definitely right up there in my top albums for sure of the 80s and definitely of that period. I mean, you hit on all the points. This was a new band at the time. They retained some elements, but I mean, this formation and specifically this album, because I think the other I Beat and Three of a Perfect Pair were a little less successful consistently for me, even though they kept on experimenting. I think this album was extremely well thought out, better planned, and more succinct, and has a longer lasting impact as a result of that.
Yeah.
It's experimental as all hell.
Yeah.
Like you said, first time you listened to Elephant, I mean, I remember first time I listened to Elephant Talk, you gave me that tape, which was the best of King Crimson, and I kept playing side 2 because I was just like, I mean, I knew some of the old King Crimson, but this 80s stuff I had not really heard. And to me, I was like, yeah, I need more of this stuff. And this album is by far their finest as far as I'm concerned, definitely of this period. And it's very timely for me because I have been kind of studying, after reading Bill Bruford's autobiography, I've been kind of studying his playing and the way he approaches that instrument. And it's out of this world the way the man thinks. He still thinks this way. If you've seen any of those videos on YouTube and Bruford and the Beat and things like that, I mean, the guy is, you know, was he well regarded? He certainly was. I think he's actually underrated as a drummer, which is kind of amazing. But just seeing the way that guy just is able to fit patterns and rudiments into becoming songs and adding to and subtracting at will, all the while moving like an octopus and saying, what he does is mathematically simple, but then he's adding all of his limbs, and he's like, well, we'll just add a triplet here. But it's not as simple as that. But to Bruford it was. And I think he was the perfect choice of a drummer because he was so forward thinking and always will be. And obviously he's retired now, but he's a guy that just would, Pete. I mean, he's like, yeah, okay, done that. Time to move on. Time to move on, something else. And Fripp, the perfect counterpart, because he's a very mathematical, I want to say like a graphic guitar player, plays in like a graph, like very, very mathematical. And running the lines with Tony Levin, just the three of them rhythmically, the way they split apart different time signatures at the same time, playing, all at once, kind of reminds me of seeing Chet Atkins, where he played two songs at once, one on the bass strings and one on the treble strings. You had 4/4 and you had 7/6/8 going on at the same time, but different instruments are playing different time signatures. Then you add on top of that Fripp, who's a monster. I mean, I'm sorry, Ballou, who's an absolute monster, rock star. What a band and what an album. Great choice. Love it.
Yeah. And it's funny, when you compare like this album in this period, this lineup, to the last lineup before they broke up. And there are some similarities, but, whereas you had, Wetton and Fripp and Bruford and Cross were brutish and savage, totally could go off the rails at any time, and great improvisers. Here you have a little bit more sophistication, and yeah, they could improvise as well, but they kind of rein that all in. We're going to make it just as complex and nuts as that last line version of King Crimson, but here it's going to be a little bit more accessible, still mind-numbingly brilliant and mathematical and smart, but still for those who crave something that's a little bit more singable, hummable, melodic, we'll give you that as well. So it's just different. It's all King Crimson. And I it's funny because I looked at like 4 different King Crimson albums for this, and I was like, all right, so I probably I had like In the Court of the Crimson King, could have easily picked side A of that album. I almost did, but I'm like, I talk about that album a lot. And I was looking at Lark's Tongues and Aspic. I was looking at Red. Could have picked either side from either of those albums. So you know what? I kept coming back to this one. This is like the first one I looked at, the second one I looked at, and I was like, man, side one, pretty damn strong. But let me go see if there are others. And I kept going to them, and I kept coming back to this. And I'm like, you know what? Damn great album, and what a side. So that's what I decided ultimately to go with. So
what's funny to me is that you talk about how they became a little more accessible, and yet the singer switch is ironic because you have John Wetton, who is the silk-voiced singer of Asia, after the most melodic voice in rock that I think I've heard in a long time.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, he was kind of doing the more edgy singing, whereas you had Ballou, who was certainly edgy, but still melodic and pop kind of accessible, to a point. It's a kind of interesting dichotomy and a switch.
Yeah.
Think of that.
Yeah. Cause I think Wetton really came into his own as a vocalist more so in UK and Asia than in King Crimson. He still was really good in King Crimson. He had his moments, but I don't think like in 1973 or 1974, I don't think anybody's going to say that Wetton was on par with like Greg Lake.
Yeah.
Not quite. Not at that point. But then all of a sudden in UK, you're starting to hear, well, man, he's really gotten better. And then all of a sudden in Asia, he's an amazing singer. And
he finds his voice. Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
he really did. He really did. I always, again, I love his singing in the early Crimson albums, but his bass playing was just as impressive, I thought, back then, because he hadn't really, Starless, notwithstanding, and a couple of the songs, he sounded amazing. But I think that, yeah, you're absolutely right. He came into his own years later. Whereas you have Baloo, who's got this kind of Beatles thing going on, and he could be also very gritty when he wanted to, but he had a very great voice also when he wanted to as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. Could really carry a melody, and obviously could play the hell out of the guitar, and do whatever he wanted to do on that instrument. So that's that's a powerhouse.
yeah,
Powerhouse.
and kudos to Fripp for wanting to work with another guitar player at that point, and he picked a guy who sounded nothing like him, because they both completely different, right? You never mistake the two of them at all, and that's what was so cool about it. So
yeah, love that pick, man. Love that band.
Thank you. So two great ones here today. So Chicago 5, side A, and King Crimson, Discipline, also side A or side 1. So let us know what you think of these two album sides in the comments below, as well as your pick for day 30 down below. We've got one more day coming at you tomorrow. So thanks everybody for watching all month long, and stay with us one more day. We've got our last day tomorrow, where hint, you're going to get a handful of picks tomorrow that may give you a hint as to who might be on the show tomorrow. And then starting on the 1st, we're going to be doing each and every day countdown from day 1 to the last day of June, my top 30 Southern rock albums of all time. I'm starting with number 30, going all the way to number 1, because Pete loves to listen to Southern rock in the summer. So why not bring in the summer with my favorite Southern rock albums of all time? So that's coming up starting on the 1st. And then in July, we'll be back to perfect album sides, maybe with a little twist involved. And I'm sure you'll see Steve once again during that month. So stay tuned for that and lots more. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube, all together, all the damn time. For Steve Fleck, I am Pete Pardo. See you all tomorrow morning. Have a good one, everybody.